Hey everyone, I'm Kevin with Victory 4x4. In this video, I'm going to walk you through our roof rack installation for the first gen Toyota Sequoia. So this is going to be pretty quick and easy. At all four corners, you're going to have a plastic cap like this that needs to be removed to reveal the factory mounting fasteners, as well as just back here, kind of in the center of the rack. We're going to start on this passenger side front corner. You can kind of get your hands around the inside of this and pull up a little bit. You can get in here along the front edge with a flat screwdriver very carefully, or a plastic pry tool like I have here, just to kind of assist in getting that up. And then the rest is kind of held in with these Christmas tree style clips. So you just got to kind of give it a little bit of firm pressure up and then slide forward to release those tabs and get these out of the way. Once you have that cap removed, you're going to see the two factory fasteners down in here. To remove those, you'll need a T30 Torx socket. And that's all there is to the front mounts. Now we'll show you real quick how to get the others removed. So the cap in this center mounting location is just a little bit different. You're going to want to start by getting behind this back side, either with a flat screwdriver or a pry tool. You might have to work at this for just a second, and then you can pull straight out. And then to release the front section of it, you can either slide straight forward to pop it off of its mounting clip here, or you can try to pull out. You may just risk breaking the actual clip mounting location here on this cover. Now you can see the two factory rail mounting locations here. You're going to need to remove these two screws. Those can be discarded, and then there will be one running vertically down into the roof that needs to be removed after this entire rail assembly is out of the way. To get these two side mounting fasteners removed, you're just going to be using the same T30 Torx socket. Then with both of these fasteners removed, we'll show you how to disassemble the rear mount. So back on this rear mount, this is going to be basically the same process as we did on the front. Kind of get this cap popped up, use your pry tool or a screwdriver as needed, and get the cover out of the way. And then, just like up front, you have two of those factory mounting screws that can be removed with your T30 Torx. Once you get these fasteners removed, that should free this entire side rail up from the roof of the vehicle, and then you'll just need to repeat that process on the other side to remove the entire rack. Once you've done that over on the other side, this entire assembly should be able to be relatively easily lifted off, complete like this, and it may just be beneficial to grab the help of a friend. With the rack out of the way, you can access the single fastener here and get it removed so that you can remove both of these center mounting brackets. Then the last thing you're going to need to do while you're up here is come back and clean up each mounting location. Just get any of this dust, dirt, debris from the years out of the way. Make sure you're using something that's kind of streak and residue free. I've just got some glass cleaner here, and that should be all you need to clean this up. Next, you're going to move on to the assembly of your rack. So you can kind of see what you're going to get here. You've got two side rails. You should have 8 of these extruded crossbars, as well as a front and rear fairing, a pile of mounts, and some edge trim. We're going to start right here with getting the crossbars mounted to each side rail. So for that, you just want to pay attention to these. There's going to be a couple milled slots in one end. We typically put those to the driver's side as well as facing up. Those are going to be to drop in your T-nuts for accessory mounting later on. Either way, it's just best to have them kind of uniformly on the same side. Once you've got that sorted out, you can take the side rail and one of your crossbars to get started. You'll be mounting them through these horizontal slots with 1/4-20 button head bolts with stainless washers. And then the last thing we want to recommend here, since they are stainless bolts going into those aluminum crossbars, is that you use a little bit of anti-seize lubricant on each fastener to to make sure that you can adjust these later on. So get the bolt through the side rail. Really doesn't matter which crossbar you start with. You can get both bolts going in to this rail. And then using a 5/32 hex, you can just kind of lightly snug these up for now. Now what we found is easiest is to just kind of run all the way down one side and get these assembled, and then work your way down the next rail, just kind of lifting them up one at a time and getting the crossbars installed fully into both side rails. Once you have all these crossbars installed into the side rails like so, you're going to move to installing your front and rear fairings. Now here on the front fairing, you're going to start with the provided edge lock trim. You're going to need to trim this to length. We're basically looking to cover this front edge kind of from point to point here, and that's the area that's going to come into contact with the roof on the vehicle. So to do this, you could get strategic and measure it out. It works pretty well to just kind of hold it over one point here, stretch it out along that edge, and then you can kind of mark it with your thumb once you get out to the other end. And then using something like these tin snips, you can cut that off to length. Now this is like an aluminum impregnated material here, so you just want to make sure that you pull out any pieces that may be protruding from the end so that you don't risk scratching anything on the vehicle. And then just working from one end to another with your cut piece of edge lock trim. Just kind of start at one point and applying pressure inward here. Just with your hand, you can push this up onto the front fairing. Do that all the way across, and then adjust or trim this end the last little bit as needed. Once you have that fully installed on the front fairing, you can go ahead and grab the rear fairing and take the remaining piece you trimmed off of this edge lock when doing the front. And in this case, you're just going to kind of center it here on the fairing between these cutouts, and just like before, start at one end and push it up into place. Then we can get these fairings installed to the rack. So you're simply going to take these with the edge trimmed down, slide them in between the two side rails, and then you'll be using the same 1/4-20 button head bolts through the side mounting holes. Just this time you'll be installing serrated flange nuts here on the inside. Go ahead and get that hardware loosely installed on both sides real quick. Then you're just going to temporarily push this all the way down in the slots and tighten one or two of these mounting bolts to hold it in place for now. That'll just kind of hold the side rails of this rack up off of the roof when you're setting this down on the vehicle. Then the rear fairing will install to the rack the same way. So once you have the rack assembled, you can come up here and begin installing the mounts. Now we are going to be installing these with some RTV sealant underneath them. So this needs to be a little bit of a quick process to get all these in place and get the rack down on before that dries. So just make sure you have plenty of time as you go to do this step. In order to determine which mount goes where, you're just going to be looking at the last letter on each of our part numbers here on the brackets. So for instance, the front one that I have here has an F, the center or middle mount in this case has an M, and the rearmost mount has an R. From there, you're just going to want to make sure this bottom flange with the round holes is going down and in toward the center of the vehicle. The mounts you receive are also going to have a small arrow cut out, and that is going to need to point toward the front of the vehicle. Now once you've identified each mount and its corresponding location, you're ready to start bolting them down to the roof. First step in that is we're going to recommend some black RTV silicone type sealant just to get a nice watertight seal at each of these hole and mounting locations. So for this, you don't want to make a big mess, but you want to be generous enough that you know you're getting a good seal. So you can just place a nice bead around each of these holes, make sure to get these center exposed holes as well. And then when the mounting bracket gets tightened down, it'll seal between there too. Once you have your RTV around all of those, you can grab your mount along with the provided 6mm button head bolts and the large diameter washers. You can kind of line this up and gently place it down on the roof, making sure not to squash that so much that you cover the hole and can't see where you're at. And then just before you place the bolt and the washer down in, we're going to recommend some additional RTV down into the hole, as well as just a little bit on the top of the bracket. That way you know the bolt passes through the sealant as you're threading it down, and you know you're going to get, again, a good watertight seal up here. After you have each of these started, you're just going to need a 4mm hex. You're not going to want to tighten these all the way down at this time. You're just going to kind of lightly snug them in place. You are going to be looking to see, it might be a little hard here, but a little bit of RTV come through kind of around the washer and everything. You don't want a huge mess, so you can wipe that up as needed, but you get a little bit of that all the way around the washer, you know you got adequate coverage there. And then you can kind of see that it's snugged up, but I can still move this around a little bit. That way, when we bolt the rack in place, these mounts have a little bit of compliance, and then we'll come back and tighten these down once that's all up here. So that installation process is going to be the same for the remaining 5 mounts. So you can go ahead and do that, get all these up here, and then grab a friend to help you place the rack down on the roof. So once you get the rack up here, you're just going to need to kind of set a side rail down and hook all 3 mounts on one side. And then you can kind of begin lining up all these mounting holes and installing more of that 1/4-20 button head hardware. Then, now that you have the rack up here on top of the vehicle, you've got all of your side mounting hardware loosely installed. You're going to want to kind of snug these up. You don't have to go crazy at this time, because you might have to loosen them for your vertical adjustments later on. But you want to get them tight enough that they pull the mounts square to this side rail and hold everything straight before coming back and tightening those bolts down into the roof of the vehicle. After you've done all that, the rack and the mounts are tight to the roof. You're going to need to come up here and loosen the fairing mounting hardware that you kind of just snugged up earlier on. Do the same thing in the rear. That'll allow these to move, as well as you to loosen this side mounting hardware up a little bit and make any vertical adjustment here that you may need to. Now what you're going to be looking for as you're making the vertical adjustments of the rack along the side is just to get this more or less parallel to the roof line, and then you just need to make sure at the height you set it at that you've got enough adjustment in the front and rear fairing slots to get these pushed down tight to the roof surface of the vehicle. After you're happy with your side rail height and have everything adjusted and tightened back down there, the last thing you really have left to do is to set the height of your front and rear fairings. Now, one thing we want to point out as well as recommend on each of these fairings, everywhere that this edge lock trim comes into contact with the painted roof surface, we are going to recommend you pick up some paint protection film. You can get it anywhere online from multiple different brands and manufacturers. It's all pretty much the same thing. It's like a clear vinyl type sticker. You just kind of mark the front edge of this out with a piece of tape, typically painter's tape or something along those lines. You can set that mark 1/4 to 3/8 of an inch ahead of this edge lock trim, lay down a strip of that paint protection film, and then when you put this fairing in, you slide it down tight to the roof. It's only going to be coming in contact with that film. That way over time, as dust, dirt, debris comes into contact with the paint, maybe gets stuck under here while you're out on the trail, you're not going to damage that roof surface. Once you have your paint protection film and everything in place, the only thing you need to do to adjust this fairing is kind of pushed down and forward so that you're sliding this down in these slots. Make sure you have adequate pressure so that it's not going to move under the wind going down the road. And then with a 5/32 hex, you can tighten up this side mounting hardware. You can do the same thing on the other side as well as that rear fairing to finish things up. So as always at this point, we're going to recommend that you go back and run through all the hardware, make sure everything's tight to fully complete your install. Now if you guys have any questions about this roof rack installation or any other Victory 4x4 product, feel free to reach out to us. You can send us an email at info@victory4x4.com or give us a phone call at 269-459-8447.